welcome this morning. Thanks for joining us bright and early. My name's Kyle Jebker, and I'm the director of the IMA lab. This is Rita Troyer, who's one of our graphic designers, and then Gray Bowman, who's our lead software architect. Originally, our plan for our sessions here at the conference, we had talked about having some of our partners with us from the TAP grant, but a lot of them actually had to back out, so you're going to get to hear from us instead. So I hope we can entertain you for the hour, but we'll still cover a lot of the things that we mentioned in there. One of the things, we had a bunch of case studies, and so we got them all grouped together into a single session, and what we've tried to do is come up with a way to bring them all together and some overriding themes. So we're going to kind of talk through that a little bit first and then kind of break that down into the different projects as we go along and how that kind of applies to each one. So these are the things that I really wanted to kind of emphasize that we've been looking at over the last year. At the Indianapolis Museum of Art, we've gone through quite a bit of a transition with the new director. Our team has changed quite a bit over the last year with Rob left and a few other people have left. So we've been thinking a lot about how we can approach technology projects and still make them efficient with fewer resources. Our museum has gone through some layoffs, so there's a lot that has happened in the past year that has really had us thinking about how can we make sure that the technology that we're building in the IMA lab is useful for everybody in our institution. And basically what we've come down to is these three main things: simplify, reuse, and explore. And we'll kind of step through each one of those. But basically, from a high level, simplification of our technology, simplification of processes, reusing tools that we build, reusing data, and then using the time that affords us to explore and try new things. So we'll start off with simplify. One of the things that we've been looking at is a lot of the systems that we've built in the last few years, specifically thinking of internal things at the IMA. And one of the things we realize is maintenance costs of some of the systems we built are very high. And so I was thinking the other day, and I thought, really we should be building a house we want to live in. And it doesn't just apply from the technology side. We've had new content people come in, and they're like emailing us every day. How do you do this? How do you do this? And it's not straightforward for them. And so they don't really want to use it because it's not easy enough. So this all goes back to this idea of simplifying things for people, not only for us from a technology side, but also for our users, making the house that we want to live in.
All right. So just in general, we've been improving our process and thereby making a better product. Certainly removing complexity from the interfaces that we're building, trying to create reusable tools, which we'll get to later, and then considering performance and audience with everything that we do. And this also helps improve our team our process on our team, the simplification, because now designers can jump in and edit things that we didn't used to be able to when we work with our developers.
On the technology side, I want to talk about shortening the technology stack. And when we talk about a lot of the applications that we build, we've been using the traditional LAMP stack, which is Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And that stack has served us really well over the past 5 to 10 years. And it probably will in the future for the next 5 to 10 years. But the stack is becoming antiquated. We're doing more and more complex things with this technology stack to the point where a lot of times we have to implement some kind of caching because it's just too slow otherwise. So we've been looking at taking this stack and what can we do to shorten the amount of technologies involved, right? And doing that gives us fewer points of failure, fewer errors, fewer places where things can go wrong. And this isn't just about the server software, but also all the code libraries and everything else that we use in our software. And there are cases where we could use one library in our software, and then something that it depends on ends up becoming unmaintained or just fails in some way that causes a cascading failure amongst all of our other code. So part of this shortening the stack is trying to figure out not only how can we reduce the server surface area, but also the code surface area.
So another thing, as I mentioned kind of earlier, is that building and using better tools is something that we've been really trying to focus on over the last year. And as I said, as we've had new people coming in, trying to get them to use some of the systems that we've built has been overly complex, some better than others. But our main website's a good example in that, it's built on Drupal, which has served us really well. But there's some complexities in it, and it's gotten to be this system that is so big and so complex that we built up over the last 4 or 5 years that it's getting to the point where it's almost unwieldingly, out of control. And so we're trying to rein that back in and taking some pieces out that we can and refactoring things so that the tools are better for our users and making them more simple, but also simpler for us to maintain. I think one of the things we've realized is our staff, we used to have 8 people in the lab, and now we're down to 5. I think we need one more. But right now that we have 5, we don't have as much time to maintain the things that we've built. So what can we do to, build tools that we can use on one platform and another, so that when we do maintenance, it covers a wide breadth of those projects, instead of it being, oh, we got to fix the website, so we'll just spend some time over there, and it doesn't impact everything else. So trying to limit the amount of tools that we're using so that they're repeated across our products, and things that we're using internally as well is one of the things we really want to focus on. And so part of that too then is looking at what services exist. There's so many companies that do things so well, and a lot of times they're not very expensive. Sometimes they're even free, depending on what you're trying to do. We have, with our new website that we launched earlier this week, we have a contact form. So we needed something to be able to send email, right? There's a service built by MailChimp called Mandrill. You can send 10,000 emails a month for free using their API. We're not going to get more than probably 5 a month, I would imagine. I don't know if we've ever gotten more than that in a month in our contact form. So we don't have to pay anything for it. It took us about, a half hour to integrate it into the system. And now we don't have to manage that ourselves. So, looking and seeing what's out there. A lot of the things we've been doing internally on our team too, from a project management standpoint, has been looking to services as well for that. There's a service called Trello that you can use to manage tasks and projects. So we've been using that. We do use Basecamp too, which we pay for, but Basecamp even is a minimal cost for project management. So offloading those things so that our team doesn't have to maintain it. I think this would really, is really something that smaller museums that don't have large technical staffs really need to start looking at and seeing, all these companies are doing things that have larger resources and staffs than we're ever going to have, and so they can devote 20 people to a product where if we build our own thing to do that, we're devoting maybe a quarter of someone's day or once a month or something like that. So trying to find what services are out there, and what's new and what works well can take some time, but at the same time it pays off in the end, because you can find things like I said, that Mandrill. And we don't have to manage our email sending at all. It's just all handled by MailChimp.
So in simplifying, we are trying to get better at our iterative process. And with the technology evolving, it becomes easier for us to modify and make changes and create new versions more quickly. And then we're also taking into account evaluation, user testing, and again, just coming back and iterating and trying to simplify, both for the user and for our team.
So the first project, and this is one we didn't have in the notes for the session, but is one we've been working on for the past month, and it was the new website that we built for the IMA lab. And we wanted to create a site that allowed us to experiment, do some things that didn't necessarily fit inside the structure of our main website. And so a big part of that was making it simple so that we could do it quickly. We could change it quickly. If there was a new technology trend we wanted to try out, we could just throw it on there and do it. And so this kind of goes back through all the things we've been talking about in simplifying the process, the hardware, the software that we're using. I will admit the initial like setup of getting this going and trying out some new things, there's some complexity there, I guess, but at the same time, now that it's there, it's very simple. What we can do with this is, in the end, it's just static HTML. So, we've kind of been talking everything old is new again. And so, static HTML from a server standpoint, we're running this on a simple VM that's sitting at our building. We're not pushing it out to Amazon or something else where we're paying. We have this old server that's sitting in our museum that we've had forever, and we just threw it up there because all it is static HTML. It doesn't require much to run this site. But part of the process that we used to simplify was more centered around our team. So our team is very technically savvy, so that we weren't really focused on the content entry part yet. We really wanted to test out a new way of just deploying a website. And so that's where the static HTML idea came in. But one of the things we didn't want to do was have to hand edit every single page. If you have a header on the website, you don't have to copy and paste that into every HTML page. So we found some new tools. Specifically in this case, there's Grunt.js, which was a task running application that you can run on a Node.js server. And it has all kinds of things to combine JavaScript files, generate HTML on the fly from content files. And so Matt and Rita, our designers, they're able to work on the templates, work on the content, and then save those files. We push them up to GitHub, the code repository service. It talks to our server. Our server says there's new code. It pulls it down, regenerates the whole website, and deploys it out on the server. So anybody on our team at any given point in time can change a file, save it, push it up to the repository, and the website's updated automatically. So there's no time where our designers have to come to us as developers, where our main website is like that now, and they're like, hey, can you push our changes up? We got these things done. And it's so simple that, if it breaks, and it has occasionally, it's just going in and seeing in the compilation, log that there was a break in the file, and we can fix it really fast. Because it is a small site and it's something that we want to be able to change quickly, it's worked out really well. So this has us thinking, what else could we use this for? Can we update?
I was just going to add to this that I think in general, our idea with this site also is, I know for designers and developers, we generally have a portfolio site, and this was our portfolio site, and we wanted to experiment. And in doing so, I don't think we necessarily set out knowing this path that we were going to take, but it really worked out well for our team, especially in the simplifying.
Right, and so it's definitely got us thinking about how can we use this approach for other things. We're looking at potentially redoing our collection pages over the next next 8 months or so. And so if we do that, maybe we could just output static HTML pages of all 50,000 objects in our collection. You could archive those HTML pages very easily then. There's some benefits I think that could be had there. So, we're really early in kind of understanding what this means for us as a team in this project. And I think, throwing a content person in this, they'd probably freak out. But if we can build simple tools to get them in there to create that content, one of the great things about this too is if, we have, since it's all it is in a revision control system, if there's a change in content and we want to roll it back, that change history is there automatically. We didn't have to build that ourselves. And so that, going back to using other services, it just really made a whole lot of sense. Just a couple other things in here. We're using Handlebars as a templating engine for this. So that's a pretty common library that's used quite a bit in JavaScript, and we're able to use that on the server and on the front end, which is really great. Just another screenshot. So all of this is being output as static HTML by our build process. And there's a lot of flexibility in what you can do with that. One of the things that this also lets you do is you can create what's called markdown files and have it process those into HTML documents as well. And so right now we have it set up where we actually were creating the content and adding in HTML tags, but you can use this markdown syntax, which is kind of like a wiki style of entering content where you have like underscore and or equal sign, like tag, different kind of markers around text that would cause things to be bold or italicized, things like that. So if you're entering it that way, you don't have to worry about learning HTML, which might be one route that we can go to get content people more involved.
So our next process motive is to reuse. We've been thinking about reusing our designs, our data backing up the designs, the tool sets, and in general, just improving the reliability of our projects. And again, thinking about resources and time. So design. For this, to reuse our designs, we're thinking about iterative design methods, again, iterating, but possibly reusing the same designs for various exhibitions, which you'll see in a second. Thinking about responsive design so that we can reuse the same website across multiple devices for a seamless experience. And multi-platform projects. So we're using tool sets that enable us to build apps for iPads as well as iPods.
And we're looking to our platforms and tools to either find tools and platforms that are easy to use and easy to modify, or building our own in a modular fashion that we can reuse several times over. This gives us a familiarity with those tools and platforms that gives us an increase in reliability and speed when implementing and using those. A good example of this is we had a request to build a survey, visitor survey into our website. And so we built a JavaScript tool that we can reuse amongst several websites for this purpose. And it, again, uses an outside service, SurveyMonkey, to report these results to. So here's the first run of this tool set for collecting the survey results, and this was on our main website for a few weeks. And then later on down the road, we did a redesign of our website and completely modified this tool in just a few lines of code to be presented on the new website. And it was the same tool, just a few lines of code difference, and we just basically picked it up and dropped it onto the new website and was able to use it just like that. So it gives you the ability to not spend a lot of time rehashing the work that you've already done to build these things.
Okay, and so not only are we looking at tools, but also reuse of our data. This is one of the things that we've, I think, been harping on a little bit for years now, I guess. And I'm not going to stop harping on it because I think it's really important. We have, with the TAP and TourML project, one good example of where we talk about this a lot is, your data, it shouldn't be tied to your interface. It should be portable. It should be reusable. You should be able to repurpose your content. You should be able to own your content. You don't want it stuck in some system that you can never get it out again and not be able to use it. If you create content for an exhibition, for example, you want to maybe put that on your website later for historical reasons to allow researchers to get at it and learn about the exhibition that you did, 50 years ago. Having the ability to do that is hugely important. And so, we spent a lot of time with the TAP and TourML grant developing the specification for TourML so that your content could move from one system to the other and at least had structure around it so that if it was, 50 years from now, someone could read that data and be able to at least understand, get some meaning out of what you were trying to represent by that data. I think, we often I have talked about this in the past, but like I said, you don't want to get stuck with your data stuck in one system. So we'll talk about this a little bit more when we go into the TAP and TourML and how that is working with some of our internal projects. But I think it's really important to just think when you're modeling these systems and thinking about how you can store your data, how you can get it out, how can you. And this kind of goes back to the services too. If we're relying on external services, can you get your data out ever? Because if that's important to your institution and you are going to rely on some of those services like I was talking about, if they're more for putting data into it, can you get it out? And then can you reuse it? So that, it's really important to think about when you're making decisions.
So content reuse, thinking about, we just did this website refresh on the main IMA website, and there were a lot of people on board entering in content and allowing for content collaboration and using a CMS such as Drupal, which is what we use. And then also considering the learning curve. We've experienced some staffing changes and thinking about how we can best reuse an interface so that the learning curve is less difficult for content entry. Okay, so one of the examples of a project that we've done recently where we're reusing an interface, we built an application for an exhibition that we held recently for Ai Weiwei. According to what, this was an in-gallery iPad app. It was TourML driven. So I got this request from Audience Engagement. We had just, it was a touring exhibition in North America, and it had just come from the Hirshhorn. And it was a request to have something in the gallery to give better context to the works of art, because that was some user feedback that people wanted to see out of the exhibition, and just to generally aid in the visitors' understanding. So this was our first iPad in-gallery interactive of its kind, but we knew that we wanted to build an interface that we could reuse for other exhibitions, because for this year we have a really tight exhibition schedule and not a lot of time in between each exhibition to make something new. So I kept in mind with this, this is a contemporary exhibition, certainly a younger audience. So I wanted to think about that, but I also wanted to use just our general brand fonts as well, so that we weren't having to change the fonts and the look of this for every single show. So with this, I built this around the exhibition title treatment and the general color palette, but I kept the main navigation our same institutional font. This is just a large background image here that we can easily drag and drop in for whatever exhibition we have. And then a reuse of a similar navigation. We knew once we talked to Audience Engagement that they could continually break this app down into a timeline, some kind of theme, maybe an interview, events and programs. So we knew that the general interface and hierarchy would remain the same for multiple exhibitions. So here are just some example screens. This is the timeline. So users can scroll through here and click into an interior page and find out more information. This is the theme section. This is just images that I exported, again, so that we could drag and drop into the interface. And the interface was built in a way that a lot of this was about me exporting graphics so that we could easily update it for future exhibitions. The interior pages just, again, showing images and artworks where you can click in and find out more information regarding the theme, and then as well as tombstone information. So this is people using it. And now we have the Matisse exhibition. So this is a 20th century artist. So definitely a different type of aesthetic. But again, it's centered around timeline, process, quotes, and connections. So the same sorts of page types. So here's an example of how we've reused this. So I dropped in the new title treatment. I made this page different. I actually did use the exhibition fonts for this, so that was a little change. But again, the reuse of the timeline, working with the curators here to establish dates and images. The interior page for the timeline. And then you'll see kind of that repeated process, which previously was themes, broken down. Again, these are just graphics that can be dropped in. And Kyle will pick up from here.
Yeah, and so not only is this, did we reuse, reuse our kind of design resources, and reusing the technology was a big part of it as well. Like Rita said, we didn't have a lot of time in between these exhibitions to come up with something completely new. Going from the Ai Weiwei to Matisse, we did make some updates to the app. iOS 7 came out, so that was doing some work to get that change in there, but also making things even more flexible. So you saw the screen that had the grid of images. We made that so that you could put in an arbitrary number of images and it would just tile them out. So you could say it had 6, it had 8. Make it more flexible so that if we want to use it again and they need, they have 8 different categories or 12 different categories, that screen would automatically adjust itself. So the way, and it's all driven by the content. We don't have to go in and say, this one actually uses 8. The page loads and it looks and says, oh, there's going to be 8 things here, and it creates those. So, doing some things like that has been a way to make it even more flexible. But the amount of time we spent in the second iteration, I bet was, if not a third to even an eighth. That's kind of big range, I guess. But there was quite a bit less time that we spent on it because the software was already there and ready for us to use. This year, we actually had 2 apps in the Matisse show. This was just about the collector. And again, we reused the same app, and it just used a single type of screen. So this, when you swiped over, it had a bunch of videos that you could watch about the different, about the collectors and their life and how they collected all of these works. So it's using the same app, same technology, but it's just being driven by a different set of content. And then again here, we also have iPods that can be taken around in the gallery, and that data is all being driven into this app. So this is using the TAP app. We did some updates again for iOS 7, and we pushed those out, at least some of them so far, into the public repository for TAP. But we've got a little bit more work to do there to make things look as nice as this one did. But what we did, we've had TAP, I think, for 3 years now that we've been working on that project, and the authoring component has really been pretty stable, and we didn't have to make any changes for these apps. We added a couple different things to create new fields, but the authoring side of things, we don't do that at all. We hand that completely off to our content people, and they go into the Drupal website and create all of the content, build out the content for these what we call tours, even though they're stationary pieces. Well, this one isn't, but they're able to go in and do that themselves. They don't need our help. Basically, we come in then when we want to put it onto the devices. For things that are in gallery like this, we typically are loading all of that data onto the device so that it doesn't need to have Wi-Fi to pull down the data. It makes it a little more difficult to update them during the show if you want to, but with this exhibition in particular, we knew because of all the rights and things we had to do to get this content ready in the first place, we knew we weren't going to change it unless there was something that came down from the rights holders that they were like, you didn't get permission or something. So it was pretty clear like we weren't going to have to update it unless there was some major problem. And so we decided just to push it on there and not rely on our Wi-Fi. And so, what's been really great is to have that separation where we can just tell our content people, go get the content ready. If there's questions, obviously we help them with that. But for the most part, it was them getting their data organized, figuring out how to structure it inside of the TAP application, and then passing that along to us. And we can suck it into this app. We can suck it into the iPad app. The TAP grant that we were a part of with the IMLS and had our 9 different partners all did implementations very similar to this too. And there's a web app that goes along with it. If we had permission to put this stuff in the web app, we could push it all online with that one system. So this, goes to the reuse of the data, the reuse of the technology, reuse of the designs. This really encapsulates that really well. The iPad app that we have, we actually had some extra money left in the grant, so we put in an extension, and we're going to be releasing that as an open source project as well. We just got to debrand it from our exhibition so that we can put that out there. So in the whole TAP environment right now, it's a Drupal website that we built for the content authoring that then outputs what is called TourML, which is an XML data spec that gets read into the apps. So there's a web app, the iPhone app, and then there will be an iPad app that we've developed once where we can get that out the door. we've been looking at Android as another thing to get in there as well, and just we don't have the expertise for Android development at this point, so we haven't gone there. And for most of the part, what we've been doing, at least for our museum, has been on things that we give out to people. So, we aren't, and if we can't do it that way, and it is something we put online, we're doing it as a web app, so then we don't limit our audience by only having an iPhone app. There's at least the web opportunity for that content to be accessible as well. So that's, I guess, kind of wraps up the Tap into ML part. I'd be happy to talk about more of this with questions or anything you have at the end too.
Okay, so as Kyle said before, all this simplification and reuse really frees up more of our time to spend exploring new technologies and evaluating the technological trend and trying to stay on the cusp of that. So I want to talk a bit about what we've been envisioning over the last few months and what we're currently working on implementing now. So we have this great idea to create some kind of central data warehouse inside our museum that pulls in all of our information from, say, collection management and our donor systems, our membership systems, and all this data that we have siloed in all these different software systems, and bring them into one central location that we can then feed off of to power all of our other software bits. So what we've been talking about is, creating a central database that's API driven that we can then hit from our website or from our iPad apps or mobile apps, and pull all that data in one request.
So a big part of that is our systems integration, and one of the things we've been looking at and working on a lot is how can we better integrate our different systems. And we use KEMU for our collection management system, and I've had a process in place for about 5 years now that pulls the data out and puts it into a middle layer that we can then use to build our collection pages on our website and use it for other means. That code is 5 years old and has worked really well, but at the same time it's very complex. Changing, if our data structure changes on the EMU side, or they enter the data in a way that's not correct, even though it is correct for their process, the way the sync works, it just fails. And so then we have to go in and figure out why the sync failed. And as we've gone through some changes in our registration department, the software hasn't kept up with the turnover in staff, but also maybe some changes in how they're doing things. So every time they make a change, we have to go in and figure out where'd that break, why is it breaking, and what can we fix, or what can we do to make that work better. Now what we've been able to do in the last few months is turn on an interface that I think was there for 5 years, and we just didn't know about it, or because we had a system that pretty much worked, didn't look into it, that allows us to use about 200 lines of code to pull out all of our data. So we're talking about basically a full library to get our data out, now being down to one file that you can easily see. I'm grabbing this field, this field, this field, and we can pull all that data out, and it is very fast. So looking at how we can optimize that is part of this as well. We've in the past always been very conscientious of using our data to drive our experiences, because we don't want to have to recreate that data. But as technology has evolved, making those more efficient, making them better processes has been a big goal. And so that one has been a huge process update. And what we're looking at doing with that is now getting that new middle tier that Gray was talking about, being able to suck that data out and not worry about those conflicts that we're running into before. Because it's so fast, it's so easy to change, we can just pull the data, not worry about merging it up, just get rid of the data that's already there and dump the new data in. Don't worry about those those errors that we were having pop up before. I think we have one right now. I think our sync is failing right now. So I just got an email this morning. So that probably won't get fixed until next week, which this is why we want to optimize these things. And so we're also, we're in the process of implementing a new digital asset management system. We decided on Piction. So we're using that to stream data into Piction as well, this new process. So that's our first use of that, and now we'll be able to use pull our images out of there using their API. So we're looking at all of these systems that we have on the back end, these big systems that we've purchased over the years, and seeing how we can pull that data out in an efficient manner. And it's not trivial, I would say, but it's so beneficial in the end to have something where you can get that data out and then reuse it for other purposes.
So part of this idea of the central data warehouse is API first development. And what that means is that the data warehouse itself will provide a bunch of endpoints and functions that you can request data from, where a lot of the logic has been centralized into that server. An example of this is an EMU, or credit line for a work of art, is broken across 3 different fields. So what we can do here is take those 3 fields and combine them and then serve them out as the credit line, so that all of our apps, our websites, don't have to do that compilation piece or that logical piece on their own. And this extends to a lot of other things as well. Keeping all that logic centralized in one place allows us to modify it easily, quickly, and across all of our applications or websites. It also gives us the ability, using an API-driven way, to become totally language agnostic. So since this is all a matter of requesting data and receiving that data from that central server, you no longer have to use the same language or the same programming tools that you use to create that logic. So an example of that is I could use something like JavaScript on this server side, or PHP, and then consume that in JavaScript or HTML on the client side. So the server technology would no longer have to match the client technology, and this could be iOS or anything else. So reactive services is another expansion of this API-driven development system, where we can say that a client or an app or something will subscribe to events from this central data warehouse. So anytime a piece of content is updated in this central data warehouse, it will send a notification to all the subscribing apps or services that rely on it. And in this way, we can reduce complexity and reduce overhead, because the only people that, like traditionally, if you want to know if something's been updated, you poll every so often and say, has it been updated? Has it been updated? And in this method, you don't have to do that, because you will receive a notification when something's been edited or changed. And this reactive JavaScript is basically event-driven code, right? Which is kind of the same thing, just not on the API layer, but in the code layer. An example of this is in the OSCE toolkit. We're using Backbone, which is a popular JavaScript framework, and we can define these events that happen. So, for example, our view that builds the menu out can be notified that a menu item has changed, even though the code that relates to changing that menu item doesn't live anywhere near the actual view that builds the menu out. So it can just receive a notification and then update itself accordingly. So one of the things that we've talked about before in other conferences is our visitor flow project, and this is a project that we have to try to establish some sort of visitor metrics inside of our galleries. And initially we were also wanting to do some type of triangulation to kind of track the flow of visitors through the different galleries. We've been doing a lot of analysis of the data that we have so far, and I think we've come to the conclusion that Wi-Fi, while it's great for determining who's been, how many people you've had in a certain space, it's not really, it's not good enough to do solid triangulation with. The range of signal strengths that you get from location to location doesn't vary enough to reliably triangulate based on that. So we've been looking at newer technologies, specifically Bluetooth Low Energy, and a specific device called an Estimote, which is a rather new thing. It is a battery-powered, self-contained Bluetooth emitter, and what it does is it basically just sits on a wall wherever you place it, and for a year on one battery, it will just say, I'm Estimote 23, I'm Estimote 23. And so you can program against that in your applications to recognize those codes that are being emitted and to react accordingly. An example of this might be on TAP, our tour software, that you could tell a certain stop, like an artwork stop, that it is Estimote 23. And so whenever you approach that location, you could automatically pull up content that's relevant to the place you're at.
Yeah, this is it's a technology that retail is heavily investing in right now, and so they're a bit ahead of us on this game. And so I think it's really interesting. These estimates, I emailed them. We had ordered some, and they came. I think they came in today. I was really hoping they would be here last week so I could bring them along to show you guys. But they're like this big, not much bigger than that, and so you can just place them wherever, and they're very, the design is interesting. They kind of look like rocks a little bit, but you could see, you could think these might fit just fine somewhere in the gallery, and people wouldn't even really notice that they're there. But you could put 3 or 4 of these in a room and figure out where people are standing based off these. I think the range is like 40
40
feet.
to 70 feet.
So the range is much smaller than what Wi-Fi typically affords, and Bluetooth does not travel through walls as well as Wi-Fi does, so you're limiting your range a little bit better that way as well. Yeah. So we're definitely looking at integrating this into TAP and getting our apps so that they can be more contextual aware. Another, what retailers are doing with them is, when you walk in their store, they can present you with a coupon or highlight to some product that they might be advertising in a given day. So there could be ways that we could leverage something very similar. We're always trying to get people to go through the gift shop. So maybe if they go near it, you could say, hey, thanks for coming in today. How about 10% off or something? And, you could drive this. This kind of goes back into, that systems integration. If we know more about the people and what they're doing, if we can tie this into our membership system, if it's a member and they come in and we know they're near the gift shop, maybe that's when you only alert the members that they get that discount, So I think there's a lot that's going to be happening about indoor location and what we can learn from that in the next few years. And we're really excited to get exploring these. So hopefully we'll have some more to talk about this in like the next couple weeks, since these should be sitting on my desk at home right now. And we're still going to look at the Wi-Fi stuff a little bit. I think there's still some information that we can try and glean from that, but we're definitely going to push, I think, a little bit harder forward with the Bluetooth stuff, because it does seem like Apple has their momentum behind it, and Major League Baseball is looking at implementing this as well. There was a big article about that not that long ago. So I think there's a lot of momentum around Bluetooth and what it can do, and especially the fact that it runs on a battery, so you don't have to worry about the Wi-Fi tracking devices. We had to find power plus a network port, so you could walk anywhere in your gallery and stick something on the wall. You might have to get permission, I guess, but it should be relatively simple to get these in place because they just run on a watch battery. And
it's also important to note the affordability of this technology. When we talk about retail spaces using this kind of technology, they're using big, usually very expensive equipment and very expensive software to accomplish these goals. And you can buy 3 Estimotes for $99. So the cost difference in these technologies is immense.
Yeah, so I think we haven't done the math yet, but to do a simple, one floor of our museum, I think we could probably spend less than $1,000 to outfit these Bluetooth devices, and then it's just a matter of getting the software in place. Estimote has an SDK, but there's also, you can write with iOS and Android. They have APIs that you can write against to look for other Bluetooth devices, and so you don't have to even use the SDK. And there will probably be other companies, if they're not already, that are building these devices, and I can only imagine that the cost of them is going to keep going down. So even though it's $99 now for 3 of these, they'll probably get smaller and smaller. Maybe they'll get small enough to the point you can put one behind every object in your galleries and know when someone's standing right in front of it. So it's going to be really interesting to see where this goes, and we're really excited to play with it. I hope we have some time over Thanksgiving to do that. My wife will appreciate that. So I think that's all we had for today. We wanted to leave some time at the end for questions. We can talk more about any one of these projects if you want. But thank you all for coming. So any questions?